My wife walked out after I refused to sell a worthless inheritance. My wife packed her bags and walked out because I refused to sell 40 acres of worthless dirt my parents dumped on me. My own brother got an $800,000 house. I got land nobody wanted. Everyone, my family, my friends, even my wife, said I was throwing away my marriage over nothing. But that nothing just made me a multimillionaire. And now? Everyone who abandoned me suddenly wants back in. Before I go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever been the overlooked one in your family? Let me know. I learned to disappear by the time I was 10. Not because anyone told me to, just because nobody seemed to notice when I wasn't there. My brother Daniel could walk into a room and everyone would turn. I could leave and nobody would ask where I went. It wasn't cruelty. It was just the natural order of things in our family. Daniel was the golden child. Charismatic, athletic, the kind of person who made everything look easy. He'd come home with a B+ and my parents would celebrate. I'd bring home straight A's and get a nod. At his high school graduation, they threw a party with 50 people, a cake from the expensive bakery, the whole neighborhood invited. At mine, we went to Olive Garden. Just the four of us. My father paid the check and said, "Good job," on the way to the car. I didn't hate Daniel for it. How could I? He was born golden. I just happened to be born second. And I learned something valuable from all those years in his shadow. I learned to watch, to wait, to think in years while everyone else thought in moments. I learned that patience wasn't weakness. At least, I thought I had. The sound of my parents cheering at Daniel's basketball games still echoes in my memory. I'd sit alone in the bleachers, doing homework, while they screamed themselves hoarse for every layup. At Thanksgiving dinners, I sat at the kids' table until I was 24. Daniel got promoted to the adult table at 16. These weren't tragedies. They were just the small, constant reminders that I was tolerated while he was celebrated. But then I met Jennifer, and for the first time in my life, someone chose me first. Or at least, that's what I thought. Jennifer came from chaos. Her childhood was a parade of evictions, parents who couldn't hold jobs, the kind of financial uncertainty that leaves scars. She told me once about coming home from school to find their furniture on the lawn, her mother crying on the curb while the landlord changed the locks. That memory shaped everything about who she became. She didn't just want stability. She needed it the way most people need oxygen. When we met, I represented everything she'd never had. A government job with a pension. A savings account that grew slowly but reliably. A car that was paid off. A life that was predictable, measurable, safe. She fell in love with the fact that I'd never surprise her. That our life would be a straight line she could draw in advance. Every Friday night, we'd sit at our kitchen table and review our budget together. She had this color-coded planner where everything was scheduled weeks ahead. She'd smile at those numbers like they were love letters. Maybe to her, they were. When unexpected bills arrived, her hands would shake slightly. When I showed her my retirement account balance, the relief in her eyes looked almost like joy. I should have seen the warning sign buried in those Friday nights. She never asked what I wanted for our future. She'd tell me what it would be, and I'd agree. That's not a partnership. That's a script. But I didn't mind. I loved her. And making her feel safe felt like purpose. She trusted systems, credit scores, retirement accounts, real estate equity. I trusted patience, the slow reveal of situations, the value of waiting for clarity. This difference had never mattered before. Our life didn't demand leaps of faith. Everything was measurable, insurable, knowable. Our perfectly planned life worked beautifully. Right up until my parents called us both into their attorney's office and shattered everything in 20 minutes. The attorney's office was all fluorescent lights and mahogany furniture. That aggressive corporate sterility designed to make everything feel official and final. My father called that Tuesday morning and asked if Jennifer and I could come in Thursday at 3. He wouldn't say why. Just that it was important. Family business. Daniel was already there when we arrived, sitting in one of those leather chairs that cost more than my monthly salary. He gave me that sympathetic smile he'd perfected over the years, the one that said, "I'm here for you, little brother," while his eyes calculated advantages. My parents sat on the other side of the attorney's desk, and I noticed immediately that my father wouldn't look at me. The attorney slid papers across the polished surface like he was dealing cards. My mother's voice came out artificially bright. "We've decided to distribute our assets while we're still alive. To avoid complications later. Make things easier for everyone." The first document went to Daniel. The family home. That beautiful century-old craftsman in the neighborhood where property values had tripled in 10 years. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a backyard big enough for his kids to play in. Paid off completely. Worth easily $800,000, maybe more. The second document came to me. Grandpa Earl's property. 40 acres of rural land 2 hours north. I'd never even seen it. All I knew was that Grandpa had owned it since before I was born, and he died when I was 15. Daniel has 3 kids and needs the space, my mother explained, still using that bright voice like she was announcing raffle winners at a church social. And you and Jennifer have always preferred your townhouse anyway. The land, well, your grandfather loved it. We thought you might appreciate having something of his. The attorney kept using the phrase, equitable distribution. I kept thinking, equitable for who? Daniel got a house worth nearly $1 million. I got dirt in the middle of nowhere. And my mother smiled like she'd given us both equal Christmas presents. Jennifer's hand found my thigh under the table. Her fingernails dug in hard enough that I'd find the marks later. But her face stayed composed. Gracious. She thanked my parents, shook the attorney's hand, made all the appropriate noises. That's one thing I'd always admired about her, she never lost control in public. She saved that for later. The 20-minute drive home happened in complete silence. Usually she'd have the radio on, talk about her day, make plans for the weekend. Now her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. I could see the muscle in her jaw twitching. She was breathing in that measured, deliberate way, like she was counting to calm herself. I tried to speak. Look, I know it's not. Not now. Her voice had that edge it only got maybe 3 times in our entire marriage. The edge that meant she was trying very hard not to scream. I watched her brain working behind her eyes. Calculating. Recalibrating our entire future based on 40 acres of dirt I'd never seen. We pulled into our driveway. She turned off the car. And then she said 5 words that started everything. I need to see something. She didn't even take off her coat. Just walked straight to our home office, opened her laptop, and started typing. The blue glow illuminated her face in our dark living room. Click click click. She was opening browser tabs faster than I could track. Property records. Tax assessments. Comparable sales in the region. The data scrolling across that screen was brutal. The land was assessed at $60,000. The area around it was declining, nearest town had a population of 1,200 and shrinking. No utilities ran to the property. No paved road access. No zoning for commercial development. Comparable properties had been listed for years. Years. One parcel had been on the market since 2019 with no buyers. She made a spreadsheet. Actually opened Excel at 1 in the morning and built a financial model. Annual property taxes would be $4,200. Every year. Eating into our savings for land we couldn't use and apparently couldn't sell. She turned the laptop toward me like a prosecutor presenting a murder weapon. $60,000, Marcus. That's what they think you're worth compared to $800,000. I stared at those numbers. At the comparable listings with no sale dates. At the declining population statistics. At everything that proved my parents had handed me a liability while giving my brother generational wealth. And I felt something I couldn't quite name yet. Something that wasn't quite anger or hurt or resignation. We need to sell this immediately, she said. Her voice was calm. Reasonable. The voice of someone proposing the only logical solution to an obvious problem. Before we're responsible for another tax cycle. I want to see it first. She looked at me like I'd suggested we fly to Mars. Why? It's 40 acres of nothing. Grandpa held on to it for 50 years. My dad mentioned once that he had offers. Multiple offers. He always refused to sell. Maybe he was sentimental. Or stubborn. She closed the laptop with controlled precision. The kind of control that meant she was barely holding on. We can't afford to be either. That was the first crack. Small. Almost invisible. But it was there. Over the next 2 weeks, Jennifer built what I can only describe as a systematic pressure campaign. She found 3 different real estate agents willing to list the property. She created an actual PowerPoint presentation titled Liquidation Strategy and Financial Impact Analysis. It had graphs. It had projections. It showed how $50,000, her estimated sale price, could accelerate our debt payoff by 18 months. She stopped saying, maybe we should sell. She started saying, when we sell, like it was already decided and I just hadn't caught up yet. Every conversation ended the same way. I'd say, I just need some time. She'd say, time for what? And I wouldn't have a good answer. Because what was I waiting for? I couldn't explain it. Just this feeling that I shouldn't rush. That Grandpa Earl had held on to this land for half a century for a reason, and I should at least understand what I had before I gave it away. But Jennifer was making perfect sense. Every argument was logical, practical, adult. And I had nothing but intuition I couldn't justify. How do you argue against spreadsheets with a feeling? Then she invited her sister over for dinner. Lisa arrived with wine and sympathy. The whole evening had been choreographed. I could tell from the way they exchanged glances, the way Lisa kept steering conversation back to the inheritance situation. Finally, over dessert, she just came out with it. Marcus, I love you, but Jen's right. This is irresponsible. She used her therapist voice. She wasn't actually a therapist, but she'd taken some psychology courses in college and never let anyone forget it. You're holding on to something with no value while creating financial stress for your marriage. That's not rational. That's emotional. My best friend called the next day. Jennifer had reached out to him too. Dude, just sell it. Why are you making this complicated? Even my own mother called. Sweetheart, maybe you should listen to your wife. Sometimes holding on too tight means losing what matters. My brother sent a text, hey man, if you need a contact for a quick sale, I know some investors who do rural land. Won't get you much, but better than nothing. Everyone in my life agreed. Sell immediately. Stop overthinking. Be practical. And I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe this was just ego. Maybe I was clinging to scraps because it hurt to admit my parents thought I deserved scraps. When your wife, your family, your friends, and even your own mother all agree you're wrong, you start to believe them. Even when something whispers, wait. But then I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. And everything changed. I came home early from work with groceries for dinner. I'd left my badge at home and had to turn around. The third floorboard from our bedroom creaked, and that's what stopped me. The sound of Jennifer's voice carrying through the cracked door. She was on the phone with her sister. I stood there in the hallway, grocery bags cutting circulation to my fingers, and listened. He won't commit to anything, Jennifer was saying. I've shown him all the numbers. All the research. Every logical reason we should liquidate. And he just keeps saying he needs time. Her laugh came through the door, bitter, exhausted. Sometimes I think he just likes being the martyr. You know? The overlooked son clinging to scraps like they mean something. The word hit me like a fist. Martyr. Like my caution was performance art. Like I was choosing to be difficult instead of just being careful. It's pathetic, honestly, she continued. His parents hand him garbage and he acts like it's some precious legacy. Meanwhile, Daniel gets a house worth almost $1 million and Marcus can't even admit he got screwed. I stood there paralyzed. She thought I was pathetic. Not just wrong, pathetic. And she was saying this to her sister, which meant she'd been thinking it for a while. Long enough to articulate it this clearly. I walked back outside. Sat in my car in our driveway for 63 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. The cold steering wheel under my hands. The sound of my own heartbeat too loud in my ears. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't want to go inside. That night, lying next to her in bed, I realized something that made my chest hurt. She didn't see me as cautious anymore. She saw me as weak. And once that happens in a relationship, there's no going back. You can't argue someone back into respecting you. Over the next week, I watched her eyes when she looked at me. The change was subtle but devastating. First disappointment. Then pity. Then something that looked a lot like contempt. She stopped arguing with me. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a death sentence. When someone stops caring enough to argue, the relationship is over. You just haven't buried it yet. She started making financial decisions without consulting me. Small ones at first, a new subscription service, a purchase she'd normally ask about. Then bigger ones. She talked to her sister about refinancing our car loan. Our loan. But she discussed it like I wasn't part of the equation. She'd turn away from me in bed earlier each night. When I tried to explain my reasoning about the land, her eyes would glaze over. She'd say, okay, in this flat, dismissive way that made the word meaningless. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't place at first. Then I realized what it was. It was the look you give someone you're embarrassed to be associated with. And then one Sunday evening, she came back from her mother's house. Set down her weekend bag. Looked at me with eyes that had already made a decision. And said the words I'd been dreading. We need to talk. She sat across from me at our kitchen table. The same table where we'd done budget reviews every Friday. Her hands were folded. Perfectly calm. Too calm. I can't do this anymore. Do what? Wait for you to make the obvious choice. She wasn't yelling. Wasn't crying. She was using the voice she used at work when she fired people, professional, final, already moved on emotionally. This land is dragging us down. Every day you don't sell it, you're choosing uncertainty over our future. Jennifer, I just need to understand what. No. You need to choose. Us or this fantasy that your grandfather left you something valuable. Her weekend bag was still by the door. I realized suddenly that she'd packed more than she needed for 2 days at her mother's. I can't build a future on a gamble, Marcus. I need certainty. I need to know we're moving forward, not drowning in property taxes for dirt nobody wants. It's been 3 weeks since. 3 weeks of you refusing to make a single phone call. 3 weeks of you treating this like some spiritual quest instead of a financial liability. She leaned forward. I need you to call a realtor tomorrow. List the property. Stop pretending there's some hidden value you're going to discover. There isn't. It's worthless. And your refusal to accept that is destroying us. The kitchen clock ticked in the silence. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw that she'd already left. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a notification. I won't sell something I don't understand just to make your anxiety go away. Her face changed. That was the moment. I watched her realize I wasn't going to cave. That no amount of logic or pressure or ultimatums would change my mind. Not because I was being stubborn. Because I couldn't live with myself if I panicked just to make someone else comfortable. Then you're choosing the land over us. No. I'm choosing not to panic over patience. She stood up. There's no difference, Marcus. But there was. I could see it clearly now even if she couldn't. She needed me to choose her way of handling fear. And when I wouldn't, she stopped seeing me as a partner. She started seeing me as an obstacle. If you won't sell, I don't know what I'm doing here. The words hung between us. Neither of us moved. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car drove past. Normal sounds in a moment that was ending everything. I guess that's your answer, she said finally. She was right. It was. Jennifer didn't explode. She didn't slam doors or scream or make dramatic pronouncements. She just systematically moved out over 3 days. The first day, she took her clothes and shoes. The hangers scraping along the closet rod made this awful sound, like nails on a chalkboard, but slower. More final. The second day, she took toiletries, personal items, things from the kitchen she'd bought before we got married. I watched her wrap coffee mugs in newspaper, each one a little artifact of our life together becoming just an object to pack. The third day, she took the photos. Her family photos from the walls, leaving these blank rectangles where the frames had protected the paint. The apartment suddenly looked like a place where someone used to live. Past tense. I didn't try to stop her. Didn't beg or negotiate or promise anything. Because I knew what she needed was for me to become someone else. And I couldn't do that. Even for her. Her final trip was Thursday evening at 6:47. I remember because I checked my watch, thinking maybe I should remember the exact moment my marriage ended. She carried one last box to her car. I stood in the doorway. I'm not doing this to punish you, she said. Her voice was calm. Rational. She needed me to know this was self-preservation, not revenge. I need stability. And you're choosing uncertainty. I can't follow you into that. You're leaving because I won't panic on command. She met my eyes. I'm leaving because you won't lead. There's a difference. Is there? She didn't answer. Just got in her car, closed the trunk with that soft, final click, and drove away. She didn't look back. Not once. The apartment felt too big. Too quiet. I stood there surrounded by the empty spaces where her life used to be and wondered if everyone was right. If I'd just destroyed my marriage over dirt and stubbornness. If patience was just another word for cowardice. I called in sick to work the next day. First time in 6 years. Then I called in sick again. I didn't shower. Barely ate. Just sat on our couch, my couch now, staring at the empty closet where her clothes had been. Dishes piled up in the sink. Mail stacked on the counter. The apartment started to smell stale. My phone rang constantly. I didn't answer. But I listened to the voicemails. My brother, hey man, heard about you and Jen. That really sucks. Listen, about that land, I know a guy who flips rural parcels. Won't be much, but you could be done with this whole mess in a month. Just think about it. My mother, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. But, well, maybe Jennifer had a point. Sometimes holding on too tight means losing what matters. Your father and I are worried about you. My best friend, dude, just cut your losses. It's land. She was your wife. You know what I mean? Call the realtor. Move on. Don't let pride destroy your life. Everyone agreed. I'd made the wrong choice. I was being irrational. Emotional. Stubborn to the point of self-destruction. And lying there at 2 in the afternoon, staring at the ceiling fan spinning endlessly, I started to believe them. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe stubbornness wasn't the same as principle. Maybe I'd just blown up my life over pride disguised as patience. On day 3, I couldn't take the apartment anymore. So I did something that probably proved everyone right about me being crazy. I got in my car and drove 2 hours north to see the land that had cost me everything. The drive took me through increasingly rural areas. Paved roads becoming gravel. Houses becoming sparse. Cell service dropping to nothing. I followed the GPS until it told me I'd arrived, but all I saw was an overgrown dirt path leading into scrub brush. I parked and walked. 40 acres is bigger than you think when you're standing in the middle of it. Rocky soil. Dry grass. A few scraggly trees that looked like they were barely surviving. No utilities. No structures. No visible value of any kind. I walked the entire perimeter. My boots crunching on dead vegetation. Wind rustling through brush. Complete silence otherwise. No cars. No planes. No signs of human life anywhere. Just me and 40 acres of absolutely nothing. I stood in what I guessed was the center of the property and shouted, "What am I supposed to see here?" My voice echoed across empty land and disappeared. The land didn't answer. It just sat there. Worthless. Silent. Mocking everything I'd sacrificed. I sat down on a rock as the sun started setting. Orange and purple painting the scrub brush. Making nothing look almost beautiful. I sat there for 2 hours. Waiting for some sign. Some feeling of connection to my grandfather. Some intuition about hidden value. Nothing came. I pulled out my phone. No service. Of course. But I'd saved the realtor's number before I left. I could call the second I got back to civilization. End this nightmare. Admit everyone was right. Sell the land, apologize to Jennifer. Try to put my life back together. My finger hovered over the contact. But I didn't call. Not because I was certain I was right. Because I still wasn't certain. And something about that felt important. Like the uncertainty itself was the point. I drove home in complete darkness. No closer to answers. No closer to understanding. But the next morning, I made one decision. I called a surveyor. Thomas Webb had been surveying land for 40 years. His truck was older than mine, covered in dust and dents. His equipment looked like it belonged in a museum. But 3 different people had recommended him, and his voice on the phone had been patient and thorough. He arrived on a Saturday morning. We shook hands. He asked a few basic questions about property boundaries, then we started walking. He didn't talk much. Just stopped every so often to check his instruments, take notes, consult old maps that my attorney had provided. After about an hour, I noticed his expression changing. At first he'd looked relaxed. Routine. But now his eyebrows were pulling together. He kept rechecking his equipment. Going back to the same spot on the western edge of the property. Something wrong? He didn't look up from his instrument. No. Maybe. I don't know yet. That wasn't reassuring. He made another note. Checked his GPS coordinates against the old property maps. His eyes narrowed. Your grandfather ever mention why he bought this land specifically? No. He died when I was 15. We weren't that close. He ever mention refusing offers for it? My dad said something once about developers coming around. Grandpa always said no. Webb made a sound in his throat. Not quite acknowledgement. Not quite surprise. He pointed to a section of dense brush. I need to do some research. Don't do anything with this property yet. Everyone's telling me to sell immediately. He finally looked at me. His eyes were serious. Then everyone doesn't know what I'm looking at. Give me 2 weeks. Don't sign anything. Don't even talk to anyone about selling. He climbed into his truck and leaned out the window. 2 weeks, Marcus. I mean it. Then he drove away, leaving me with more questions than I'd had before. Those 2 weeks felt like 2 years. I went back to work. Went through the motions. Answered emails. Sat in meetings. Pretended I was fine. But every night, I went home to an apartment that felt haunted by absence. By Jennifer's ghost in every room. And I researched. I found old family letters in boxes my mother had given me years ago. Letters from my grandfather. Most were mundane, birthday cards, notes about family visits. But then I found one from 2003. A response to something my father had written. I know you think I should sell the property, Grandpa Earl had written in his careful handwriting. The money would be good. But some things are worth more than their current market value. You'll understand someday. Maybe Marcus will too. I found records of refused offers. A development company in 2003. Another in 2007. A private buyer in 2011. All declined. Why would he say no to money he could have used? My grandmother had been sick. Medical bills were piling up. But he kept the land. Jennifer texted me every single day at 5 p.m. Like clockwork. Any updates? I stared at those messages and didn't know how to respond. How do you explain you're waiting on a hunch from a surveyor you met once? So I didn't respond at all. My brother called, just checking in, man. Any movement on the land situation? Because I'm serious about that contact if you need it. Everyone was pushing. Everyone was waiting for me to come to my senses. And I just kept waiting. But this time it felt different. I wasn't just refusing to rush. I was actively choosing to wait. And there's a difference. On day 13, my phone rang. Webb, you need to be sitting down for this. My hands started shaking. What did you find? You near a computer? I'm sending some documents. Look at them first. Then we'll talk. The email arrived while I was still on the phone. I opened the first attachment. Geological survey. The words didn't make sense at first. Technical language I had to read 3 times. Rare earth mineral deposits. Lithium concentration, significant. Recommended further analysis for commercial viability. I opened the second document. Historical land use records. Surveys from the early 2000s. More technical language. But the conclusion was clear. Mr. Webb, I said slowly. What exactly am I looking at? Your grandfather's land sits on top of a lithium deposit. Significant enough to be commercially valuable. The room tilted slightly. I sat down hard in my desk chair. It was worthless when your grandfather bought it in 1972, Webb continued. His voice was steady. Clinical. Like he was describing weather patterns instead of changing my life. Lithium wasn't commercially valuable then. Battery technology didn't exist yet. But surveys in the early 2000s revealed the deposit. That's when the offers started coming. Why didn't he sell? Because early extraction technology would have destroyed the land and paid him maybe 50 cents on the dollar. He was waiting. Waiting for what? For the technology to catch up. For processes that could extract value without demolition. For buyers who'd negotiate fair terms instead of exploitation. Webb paused. For someone patient enough to do it right. I stared at the documents on my screen. Numbers and technical specifications that translated to something I couldn't quite process yet. How much is it worth? Another pause. Longer this time. Conservatively? Once you structure proper extraction agreements with the right companies? 3 million. Maybe significantly more depending on market prices and how you negotiate. $3 million. I'd been ready to sell it for 50,000. But here's the thing, Marcus. Webb's voice got serious. This only works if you're patient. If you'd sold last month to a quick flipper, they'd have sold to an extraction company for pennies. Or gotten you locked into decades of litigation and lowball contracts that would have destroyed the real value. I thought about Jennifer's PowerPoint. Her spreadsheets. Her perfectly logical arguments for immediate liquidation. Your grandfather knew exactly what this land needed, Webb said. Someone who wouldn't panic. Someone who could wait for the right deal instead of accepting the first deal. He was testing you without you knowing it. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for 3 hours. Just sat there. Staring at geological surveys that proved my grandfather hadn't left me scraps. He'd left me a legacy. But only if I was the kind of person who wouldn't rush just because everyone was panicking. If I'd listened to Jennifer. If I'd listened to my family. If I'd listened to anyone, I'd have walked away with nothing. My phone buzzed. Jennifer. Again. Marcus, please. Just list the property. We can fix this. I didn't answer. Because she'd left me at exactly the moment I needed to stay the course. And that told me everything I needed to know. Within 48 hours of the survey becoming semi-public record, my phone exploded. The first call came from my mother at 7 in the morning on Saturday. She never called before 10. Sweetheart, we heard about the survey results. We had no idea about the minerals. If we'd known. She trailed off. Because what could she say? That they would have kept it themselves? The situation has evolved, my father said when he called an hour later. Not, we were wrong. Not, we made a mistake. The situation evolved. Like they'd accidentally given me a winning lottery ticket. We were thinking, my mother tried again in a third call. Maybe we should talk about the estate distribution. It wasn't quite fair given this new information. Funny how it was perfectly fair when I had dirt. Now that I had lithium, suddenly it needed revision. I'll think about it, I told them. I had no intention of thinking about it. But I wanted to hear them ask twice. My brother's call came that afternoon. His voice had that fake casual tone. Like we were just 2 guys talking about sports instead of millions of dollars. Hey, little brother. Heard some interesting news about your land. Yeah. Look, I've been thinking. We're family, right? This whole inheritance thing, maybe it shouldn't be about money. Maybe we should just split everything down the middle. You know, 50 to 50. Fair and square. I almost laughed. When he got the $800,000 house, he didn't mention splitting anything. But now that my inheritance was worth more, suddenly family meant sharing. I mean, I could have contested the will, he continued. But I didn't. Because family. And I think that counts for something. He started listing all the times he'd helped me growing up. Drove me to school a few times. Let me borrow his car once. Helped me move into my first apartment. Funny how those favors never mattered when he was the one getting the better deal. I'll consider it, I said. His voice changed. Got sharper. Don't make this about pride, Marcus. Pride. That's what everyone thought this was. But it wasn't about pride. It was about patience. And he'd never understand the difference. The developer calls started next. 15 calls in 2 days. All from companies I'd never heard of. All with the same energy, urgent, aggressive, demanding immediate decisions. Mr. Chen, we're prepared to make an extremely competitive offer. We need to move quickly on this. Market conditions won't stay favorable. We can have paperwork ready by Monday if you're willing to commit today. Every single one of them was trying to create panic. Rush the decision. Lock me into terms before I understood what I had. Exactly what my grandfather had spent 20 years avoiding. Then Jennifer's sister called. Marcus, hey. How are you? Lisa's therapist voice again. Jen wanted me to reach out. She feels terrible about how things ended. Okay. She's been doing a lot of thinking. About the marriage. About how she reacted. And she wonders if maybe you two could talk. You know, now that the dust has settled. Now that the dust had settled. Meaning now that I was rich. This isn't about the land, Lisa continued quickly. She really misses you. She made a mistake leaving. She knows that now. I'll think about it. Silence on the line. She'd expected me to agree immediately. To be grateful Jennifer was reconsidering. She really does love you, Marcus. Thanks for calling, Lisa. I knew Jennifer would call eventually. I just didn't expect to feel so, nothing, when her name finally lit up my phone. The text came first. Can we talk? I didn't respond. An hour later, she called. I stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Marcus. Hi. Her voice had that carefully measured quality. I heard about the land. About the survey. I'm happy for you. Really. Thanks. I've been thinking. About us. About how I reacted to everything. A pause. Maybe I was too hasty. Maybe I didn't give you enough credit for your instincts. Your instincts. Not your patience. Not your judgment. Your instincts. Like I'd gotten lucky on a coin flip instead of making a deliberate choice. I think we should talk about this in person. Discuss, us. There was that word again. Us. Like it still existed. Thursday works, I said. 6 p.m. She sounded relieved. Thank you, Marcus. I miss you. Thursday came. She showed up at exactly 6. Same punctuality. Same control. She stood in the doorway of what used to be our home, and I realized something. I didn't miss her anymore. I missed who I thought she was. She came in without asking. Sat in her old spot on the couch like the last 3 months hadn't happened. Her perfume filled the space, the same scent she'd always worn. It brought back memories that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I've had time to think, she started. Her hands folded in that familiar way. About us. About how I reacted to the inheritance. I was wrong, Marcus. About the land. About your judgment. She was apologizing for being wrong about property value. Not for leaving. Not for the contempt. Just for being incorrect. I let fear make me cruel, she continued. My need for certainty made me impatient. I couldn't see what you were seeing. And I'm sorry for that. Okay. I'm asking if you can forgive that. If we can start over. Knowing what we know now. She leaned forward slightly. Her eyes doing that thing, trying to look vulnerable, genuine. We could build something amazing together. With the resources you'll have. We could really plan for the future properly this time. There it was. Resources. Future. Planning. The same words, just with bigger numbers. You talk about couples therapy, she was saying. Working through what went wrong. Learning from our mistakes. I think we could be stronger than before. It was a good pitch. Logical. Reasonable. Well rehearsed. But all I could think was, she understood now what I was doing. But she didn't understand 3 months ago when it mattered. She understood now that the outcome validated me. What exactly has changed, Jennifer? She blinked. What do you mean? Besides the bank account. What's changed? I understand now. You understand that the land is valuable. That I was right to wait. I kept my voice gentle. Not angry. Just clear. But I'm the same person I was 3 months ago. I wanted to wait then. I want to be careful now. That hasn't changed about me. But we'd be different. We'd have resources to. We'd have money. That's not the same as being different. She went quiet. Her hands unfolded. Refold. You didn't leave because the land was worthless, I said. You left because waiting made you uncomfortable. Because my timeline didn't match your anxiety. What happens the next time I want to wait and you want certainty? Do we just repeat this? It would be different. Would it? I leaned back. Jennifer, you needed me to panic. To make quick decisions based on fear. I wouldn't do it. So you left. And now that my patience paid off, you want back in. But what you're validating isn't me. It's the outcome. Her face shifted. She was realizing I wasn't angry. I was certain. And certainty can't be negotiated with. So that's it? Her voice got smaller. We're done. We were done when you walked out. This is just admitting it. She stood. Walked to the door. Turned back. I did love you, you know. I know. But you loved certainty more. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just weren't compatible. She nodded slowly. Understanding finally. I hope it makes you happy. The money. It's not about the money, Jennifer. It never was. The door closed. Softer than the first time. Final. I sat in that same spot for an hour after she left. Not sad. Not relieved. Just, complete. Over the next 6 months, I hired an attorney who specialized in mineral rights. We reviewed every offer with the same patience that had preserved the inheritance in the first place. Companies that demanded immediate answers got eliminated. Buyers who respected deliberation stayed in consideration. My brother called every week. Every week I said no. Not out of spite. Just because his need for my money didn't create an obligation on my part. My parents suggested family mediation. I declined. Jennifer's sister tried one more time. I declined. Each no got easier. Because I finally understood something. Everyone who demanded I rush was gone from my life now. Not because I'd cut them off. Because they'd left the moment my timeline didn't match their anxiety. I could have sold for a lump sum and been done in 30 days. Instead, I spent 8 months structuring royalty agreements. Long-term payments. Environmental protections. Everything my grandfather would have wanted. Everyone thought I was overthinking again. I was just being consistent. The final deal gave me steady royalties over 20 years. Not the fastest money. But the smartest. I set up a scholarship fund in Grandpa Earl's name. 15 students funded so far. Created trusts for my nieces and nephews. Kept my government job. Kept my townhouse. Kept my old car. Nothing about my life changed except the bank account. And that felt right. 6 months after Jennifer walked out the second time, I drove back to the land. Stood in the middle of 40 acres as the sun set. The same scrub brush. The same rocky soil. But it looked different now. Or maybe I was different. I finally understood what I'd inherited. Not wealth, though that came. Not validation, though I'd found that too. I'd inherited proof. Proof that being exactly who I was, slow, patient, deliberate, unrushed, wasn't a flaw. It was exactly what this situation required. My grandfather had known me better than I knew myself. He'd left me the one thing that required exactly who I was to preserve it. Daniel couldn't have done it. Too reactive. My parents couldn't have. Too focused on immediate tax implications. Jennifer couldn't have. Too afraid of uncertainty. But I could. Because patience wasn't my weakness. It was the whole point. Jennifer hadn't left because the land was worthless. She'd left because my patience looked like weakness to her. When the land became valuable, my patience looked like genius. But I hadn't changed at all. She'd just recalculated. My family didn't dismiss me because I was wrong. They dismissed me because I wouldn't perform certainty I didn't feel. The second I had certainty, they wanted back in. That timing told me everything about them and nothing about me. Some people don't abandon you when you fail. They abandon you when you refuse to rush. And that's the difference that matters. I learned something in those months that changed how I see everything. Some people need you to move at their speed to love you. Those people will never be satisfied with who you are. They'll always be waiting for you to become someone else. Someone faster. Someone more certain. Someone who panics when they panic. And you can't build a life with someone who needs you to be someone else. The land sits there still. Waiting. Just like Grandpa Earl knew someone would need to. Just like I did. And every time I visit, I'm reminded, the best inheritances aren't the ones that make you rich. They're the ones that prove you were right to be exactly who you are. Even when everyone said you were wrong. Especially then. Now tell me, did Jennifer deserve a second chance? Or did I make the right call? Drop your answer in the comments because I'm reading every single one. And here's the thing most people never realize. Sometimes the people who say they love you will walk out the door the moment you stop moving at their speed. That doesn't make them evil. It just makes them incompatible with patience. And that's okay. Some people are built for certainty. Some are built for waiting. You can't be both. The people who abandoned me when I refused to panic? They were never going to stay for the victory anyway. Save yourself the heartbreak and let them go the first time. Thanks for being here. If this story hit home for you, hit that like button.